Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tips and Tricks for Virtual Classroom Instructors. Now, I have to confess, I have sort of a long time history as an instructor. I've been an MCT for 20 plus years, and I've been working with our company here at Learn on Demand Systems for over seven. In a lot of ways, I've been working as an instructor. So this is one of my favorite topics, and I hope it will become one of yours. We have a lot to get through. Please do not hesitate to ask any questions in the chat. Otherwise, save your questions for the end. After we thank you, we'll open it up for questions, and we can cover any topics that you would like to. So we want to talk about what you have available to you as tools inside of the Learn on Demand Systems Training Management System, or TMS. And it really should be Trainer Management System because you have so many capabilities at your disposal with the tools that we have available. We have our pre-class tools, we have our during class tools, or just class tools, and then we have our post-class tools. The pre-class tools include things like lab preparation. You can do your labs before you actually get into the classroom. Roster management, being able to see who's going to be what students are actually actively enrolled, which ones are already taken classes. You have a whole history with them as well. The pre-class checklist, giving you the capability of making sure that they have received all of the materials. And then even if we don't have a lot of physical classes going on right now, if you do eventually have physical classes, you can actually even print out a sign-in form or sign-in sheet for each day to be able to keep track of things. Then for your actual class tools, virtual classroom, the capability of being able to deliver, just like we're doing with the GoToMeeting, but we're actually going to talk about delivering using a couple of different tools. And you have the capability of sending notifications either to a specific student or to all students. You have the ability to monitor labs, once again, of all of your students or a specific student. You can control a specific student's lab in case they're having some difficulty, and you can share files with those students and be able to communicate with them. The post-class tools give you and your students post-class lab access, as well as a number of um, a number of follow-up items, things like badging if available for the training center that you're working with, or evaluations, seeing what your evaluation results are, or also even getting you an evaluation about how you feel the class went. So let's take a little bit closer look at each of these. Here's the pre-class tools for instructors. A couple of things to be aware of, even though you haven't seen exactly, you may not have seen exactly where these things are located. We're going to do a demonstration of beginning to end running through a class, and so you'll get a feel for where some of these uh, screenshots were taken from. But one thing I want to make very, very clear is that once the scheduler or the operations manager for a training organization has you listed as the instructor for a class, the second they click on save, that class goes into your calendar and you can go into that class and begin preparation. You can see the roster. You can actually go through the labs. You'll have launch buttons for all of the activities that are available to you. You also can view all courses that are available to that specific organization. So if you, for example, are an MCT, you will have access to the mock library that is available through Learn on Demand Systems, just to be able to go and look and run through classes that you might be teaching in the future but haven't taught yet. So even though it's not on your calendar, you can go and check for courses. And I'll show you how that works. You have early access to your classrooms. Students normally can't go into the virtual classroom depending on what type of virtual classroom setup. Um, up until 15 minutes before, you can get into the classroom either a half an hour or an hour before class starts, which is one of my first tips is always make sure you're the first person into the classroom. If somebody comes into an empty classroom, they may have a feeling that they have the wrong time or that they have the wrong link or something like that. It's always better for your students and for you to to make sure that you are the first person in the classroom. Use the roster link in any class, and you can see the roster is actually in the upper left hand corner there, of the first image. Let me just highlight that there for you. um, if you look here, there we go. If you look up here at the roster, you will see, and you click on that, that will give you a list of all of the people who are attending your class. And this down here is what your roster looks like. And you can see this is the pre-class sign-in sheet, or the checklist, excuse me, not the sign-in sheet, the checklist. And you can see that it has little checks for whether or not these things have been completed. Those are typically completed by the scheduler. So you have lots and lots of tools at your disposal. Oops, sorry. Lots and lots of tools at your disposal, so you can do a lot with your environment. All right, so the next one that's available is your the tools for managing your classroom and tools for managing the labs or the activities. So let's start with the classroom first. When you have a virtual classroom, now a virtual classroom might be in Zoom, it might be in Adobe Connect, it might be in Teams, it might be in GoToMeeting, whatever has been set up for your organization, that will appear just as a button that says enter classroom for you. In some cases, with a deep integration like with Adobe Connect and coming soon to Zoom, we can actually do things like a ops manager can sit in as student or sit in as instructor. And you, when you go in, you will actually get like a software check, and you'll be able to do recordings and things like that. We'll talk a little bit more about those when we get to the post and during class capabilities. Remember that your students are going to get a link to the classroom environment as well. A couple of things to keep in mind. These are just tips, not requirements, but a couple of things to keep in mind when working with the classroom. If you've never worked with a virtual classroom before, there are a couple of things you can do that will help you succeed. One of them is turning on your webcam and delivering a webcam. Now, this webinar, we want to try to make sure that our throughput is successful for up to hundreds of people attending at a time. So we just made an elective decision not to have webcam video going out to all of you. But in a smaller setting, in a 1 to 20 person class, it is often better to have webcams running. It feels more conversational. It feels more like a traditional classroom. Without the video, you're relying on just your voice, and sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to keep people's attention just showing them slides and demonstrations and speaking to them. Make sure your technical setup is proper. Make sure that you are using either a microphone and speaker setup or a headset. If you're using a headset, make sure it is charged. One of the hardest things to do is to teach all day long, forget to charge your headset, and now it's the next day and you have to have a cord stuck to your head, and you maybe have to keep your head closer to your computer because that cord doesn't reach far enough. There's all sorts of good reasons for making sure that you keep that charge. Another good idea is to perform microphone checks regularly. Is everybody hearing me okay? Am I coming through? Not to the point of it's obnoxious or you could set your watch by what time it's happening, but just periodic checks to make sure that you're not sitting there talking, not realizing that your headset turned off in the middle of, I don't know, page 2, and you're not on page 10 of the manual. Use slides sparingly but effectively. Try not to just focus on what the content of the slide is, but have a conversation with the students so that you're not just speaking to the slides. That's general good practice, but it is vital in delivery in a remote or virtual classroom. Use your demos and conversation more. Actually ask questions, have the students ask you questions, get a feel for where they're at, do lots of demos, which we will do towards the end of this presentation. Don't disconnect from your students when it's time to go to lab. One mistake that a lot of virtual trainers make is they say, all right, it's time for you to work on the lab, and you get the students in and you make sure that they're doing it, and then you stop talking to them. Now, when it's lab time in a physical classroom, we have a tendency to sort of interact and keep our eyes on what our students are doing. We're going to show you some tools you can use to make sure that you can do that exact same thing in a virtual classroom. And always be thinking about ways of engaging with your students. Asking questions, doing polls, playing games if your virtual environment allows it. Uh, Come up with all sorts of little tricks that you can use to help keep the interaction between you and the students a lively one. You do not want to be teaching at your students. You want the students to be learning from you. All right. So that's managing the classroom. Let's take a look at managing your lab environments, because quite honestly, this is the time where a lot of your students will often check out, especially in a remote delivery. A lot of times when it comes time to do classes, people are paying attention because there's something happening on the screen, either video or slides or demonstration. But when it comes time to do labs and it's supposed to be them doing hands-on, they're more interested in email or other types of activities. So I used to say World of Warcraft. I don't even know if that's still a thing, but they find ways of entertaining themselves during that time, especially when they're sitting at their home computers while taking this class. It's really tough to compete with that. So there are lots of tools that we have inside of your lab capabilities to be able to allow you to monitor your labs, keep a track of what's going on. You can see all of the boxes that are highlighted here on this slide, um, with sending notifications, sharing instructor files, thumbnails, information about how the lab is running, and then the ability to be able to monitor labs. All of these are found on one page, one single page inside of your lab environment. And finally, tools for after the class. The roster page has valuable tools. If your company supports it, they and go out and register for some badges. You can actually issue badges to your students. You can view the completion status. You can see how much of various labs these students completed. You can also email all students. You can do this either before, during, or after. There's in the roster, there's a button for email students, and you can actually filter that by all who have completed, all who are still working on it, things like that. It gives you a great way of doing email. You and your students will have after class access depending on how the class is set up. In most cases, classes are set up with after class access. The students can come back and redo the labs. They can watch recordings of your actual classrooms. Um, they can fill out their evaluations. They can do the challenges if those challenges are bundled with the labs, and you can even create or add exams as part of the class as well. Everything from the class is available on your class page even after the class is over. All right. So you as an instructor, your class page never changes. You still have your launch buttons. You still have the information about the roster. So if you have a student who says, yeah, I was in your Windows 101 class and that was 2 years ago, you can actually go back in and check out your roster from that class and be able to confirm that or be able to work with the student. The last thing that I want to make sure you understand is that you're not out there by yourself. We've got your back. We have tons of help available to you. Every single page of the TMS has a help in the upper right hand corner. click on it, and it will get you into our help system. There's documentation. There is 24/7 support. If you click on that little headset icon inside of the help, you get all of the information you need to be able to uh, contact our team. And there's a technical support webpage that you can go to at a moment's notice. This will help you submit a ticket or get access to additional documentation if you need it. So full sets of documentation available to you, 24/7 in-person support, and a technical support webpage with ways of reaching out to that support. I can't stress how important that is. If you are in the middle of a class, let us help you get your students working. You don't have to worry about getting your students working. All right. Enough of the chat. Let's get into this. Let's take a look at what we have available. And I'm going to switch from my slideshow over into our TMS as an instructor. And as an instructor, I have the ability to do a couple of things here now. So we're going to be approaching this from the viewpoint of the instructor. There will be a couple of things I'll show you that are from the viewpoint of the student so that you can see what you can do with a student at the time. So at this point, we have just signed in, and we're at what is called the home page or the administration page. So the first thing I want to show you is how can I easily get to a class that I need in order to, oops, sorry, didn't mean to pop that up, a class that I am preparing to teach. I've got one coming up today. So the easiest way for me is to either use Find Classes in the upper left-hand corner or in the Classes box. These boxes can move around, so I don't like to say where they're located. I just like you to know that look for the Classes box and you can click on Find Classes. If you do that, you can do a search and you can say starts in the future or starts today, and then you'll see a list of the classes that you have available. Now, this is fine, and there's nothing wrong with it. I can see my classes, but I'm a much more sort of visual learner or visual person. So what I like to do instead is I like to view my calendar. So I click on my calendar up here, and I scroll down, and I can see all of my classes that I have. And of course, I look like a pretty busy instructor right now. But I wanted to show you a couple of things. Now, we're going to be concentrating on the class that's running today, which is the Adobe demonstration class for tips and tricks. But I also want to show you this class example of different time zones. The reason I want to show you this is because it's really important for you to understand that your personal account will have a time zone set with it, and that time zone should be the time zone that you yourself are located in, and that should be wherever you're located. Because when you click on this, you will see that this actually is running from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But if I go back to my calendar, it shows as 10 a.m. That's because I personally am in the Central Time Zone. So our system does the switching for you. So when you see the 10 a.m., that's 10 a.m. at the time zone that is set for your user account, not for where the class is being based out of. Because in a virtual setting, you have to have one sort of central place. So this class is actually running in Pacific time, even though I am running in Central. It's a little bit confusing, but it's important to remember that whatever you see on your classes, either through the calendar or Find Classes, it's going to be in the time zone that your account is in. All right, so let's go ahead and focus on the instructor's Adobe demonstration class for tips and tricks. So I click on this, and here is my event page. Now, while I'm in this event page, I have the ability to be able to do a couple of things. Now, because this is using the Adobe Connect integration, I do have to make sure that my software is installed properly in order for me to be able to do what I need to do. So how do I do that? Well, there's a little alert down here that tells me that you need to install. In actuality, I don't need to install. All I need to do is click on this, and it will go through and it says, would you like to allow this? And I say yes, and boom, there it goes. This makes it very easy for me to be able to get in and make sure that the information that I need is available to me and ready to go. All right. Now, I do have the enter classroom button. We're going to talk about the classroom in a second, but I do want to show you that as an instructor, I also do have my launch button here. Now, if I were a student in this class, I will not have this launch button appear for my labs until 15 minutes before the start of the first day of class in the time zone that the class originated in. So if this class originated in the central time zone, which it did, and it's being held in the central time zone, I am the instructor for the central time zone, and I am a student who's in the central time zone. All of our times are going to match. But if I'm teaching from California and I'm teaching to somebody who's in Chicago and I'm teaching on behalf of a company that is in New York, the class might be scheduled in the Eastern time zone. My timer is going to show much earlier in the day. If it starts at 8 a.m. Eastern, that's going to be about 3 a.m. On the Pacific Coast. So I'm sorry, I went back too far. It's going to be 5 a.m. on the Pacific Coast. And then, of course, it's going to be 7 a.m. in Central. So all of those times are going to be in sync, and those timers are going to be important. That's why we always talk about when you're scheduling classes, make sure you take time zones into account. All right, enough of that. Let's get into our capabilities here. Remember, I mentioned that you have the ability to check your roster. You can see that my student has been enrolled. We don't know what percent they're complete because they haven't actually started yet. I do have my sign-in sheet. I do have my attendance chart. And here is that email students that I was talking about. You have this capability from the moment the class is created to be able to email your students and send them information here through this mail system. You don't even have to have your Outlook or whatever open. You can email directly from here. All right, so let's talk about classrooms. We're going to go ahead and click on Enter Classroom, and you'll see here that an interstitial page comes up here and wants to open this, and I'll say go ahead and open. If you don't have the application already installed, you are typically going to need the application to be able to share your screens and so on. And you can see here that Adobe Connect is in the process of connecting me to my class. I don't really need this window anymore, but I like to leave the window up in case I need to launch again or download any software. All right. And if I get rid of this window, now I've got my classroom window. So if I want to, share my screen or do any of the stuff that I want to do in my normal class, I can do so. You can see I'm up here as instructor. Now, a student can also do this. And I'm just going to bring over a window here. Here I am as a student, student Brian. And once again, I can click on Enter Classroom. I get an interstitial page. And I want to open it again. I'll get rid of this and I'll move this off screen. Oops. And here is my student. Notice both my instructor and my students see each other as hosts and participants. We can go ahead and deliver our class. We can share our webcam, which we should. The student can share their webcam. You can help them get that working. You can communicate through chat. You can communicate through voice. You can share your screen or share a window or share a presentation. All of that capability. You can record the meeting and then have the meeting be available for the student after the fact under the recordings. As a matter of fact, you probably should do that. So that's managing the classroom. You've got the capability. You click on Enter Classroom. They click on Enter Classroom. You both go into the classroom that's been set, and you're ready to go. I'm going to minimize these and get them out of the way. Now let's talk about labs, because this is the time where you can really lose your students because they're busy doing other things. So a example of what uh, uh, a typical situation is, my student has launched their lab and they're off and running and they're doing what they need to be able to do, or they think they need to do, and they're having some trouble. So they notify you inside of Adobe Connect, hey, I'm having some trouble. And so you want to be able to help them. Now, if we were in a physical classroom, you might go over and look over their shoulder. You might do something else that would get you some assistance, or be allow you to be able to help them. But in this virtual environment, they might be hours away. So what can you do? Well, this button up here is going to be your favorite friend, right? It's Monitor Labs. And when you click on Monitor Labs, you will see a page that shows you the title. You will have the ability to send notifications to all students in the lab. And I'm going to go ahead and send that. So my notification has been sent. I have the ability to share files. We're going to come back to that in just a second. I also have the ability to get a thumbnail of what the student is doing, as well as I am capable of seeing when they started the lab, when the lab expires, how much longer they have in that lab, how long that lab's been running, when was the last time they did something, and then when was the last council sync. If for some reason a student disconnects from the internet and is having difficulty reconnecting, this last council sync will show you when the last time the lab client on their machine talked to the lab servers and give you a report on that. But this last activity is kind of important. If the last activity here shows that, for example, they started a lab 8 minutes ago and the last activity was 8 minutes ago, you know that somebody started up their lab and is no longer paying attention. That gives you your cue to be able to reach out to them inside of the classroom and say, hey, is there anything I can do to help? You can also monitor their lab to see where they are and what they're doing. Now, the way you do that is by clicking on this monitor button right here, or monitor link, and this will give you an exact screen on a new tab of what they're working on. This is that over the shoulder thing. So we can say, hey, let's see what you're doing. Let's see where you're stuck. Now, in this particular case, you can see that as I do things in the student, you see them as the instructor, right? Now, that will sometimes help us and sometimes doesn't do us much good. Sometimes a student has gotten themselves stuck and doesn't know how to get themselves out. So then what you can do is, instead of just watching, you can take control. And when you take control, it says, are you sure you want to take control? You click on OK. And now, not only are you watching what they're doing, but, well, you can't really see it. Let me reduce the size of my screen here. As you do things inside of this computer, you'll see that it's happening on the student's machine as well, right? So I'm browsing through their files to get them to the place where they're supposed to be. Let's say this is the place they're supposed to be and they're supposed to create a new file. Now the student can take over, right click, go to new, folder, file, whatever they're going to do. All right. Then when you're all done, you can release control and you're back and you're observing. One last thing to show you before we take a look at your next steps and resources available to you, and that is the share file. If you need to give your students a little extra work, or if you've got some scripts that you like them to run in order to get the environment just right for your class, you can share files with your students in a quick and effective way. All you need to do is click on the instructor files little gray box here and click on share files. Now you can share whatever you'd like. In a lot of cases, this information is traditionally like in Word format or whatever, but if you have things that are already in document form, uh, you can put those documents in. And I was just going to use a Word document as an example here. So all you need to do is click on upload, and the display name is going to be Brian's files. Oops, that wasn't even close to the word files. There we go, files. And I can either drag and drop, and so that's what I'm going to do. Here's a simple Word file, and I place that. And you can see that there's a Word document there. Or I could click on choose, and I can go to my desktop or any of my network drives and be able to copy the files over that way. I then click on OK. Now I could add more than one file if I needed to. And I click on OK. And this uploads the file, as you see here. It uploaded it, and now it's processing it and turning it into an ISO. It is now then replicating that ISO out so that I can then share it to my students' virtual machines. Now, if I have 20 students, every single one of them is going to get this inside their virtual machine, not to their email or to their personal machine, but inside their virtual machine so that they can use it. So once this checkbox is checked for share, I click on OK. And now I'm going to bring this back here as a student. You'll notice that not only did I get the notification for welcome to my lab, but I now have some information that says my instructor has shared files with me. I can access that file by going to the resources tab, going to the DVD drive, and looking for Brian's demo files. When I click on that, it inserts that ISO as a DVD drive, and now I can go in and open it, and there's my Word document right there. I can copy it to my desktop, and I'm off to the races. I'm ready to go. I can use that. If this were a script, if this were some extra credit work, this information would be available to me inside of this lab. When I get out of this lab, that information then goes away from this lab, and then it is it would be there if I launched at the next class or the next for the next student. All right, so I'm going to remove that from the screen, and we're going to go back to our slideshow and just finish up real quick. All right. So some resources available to you. If you are an MCT, there are two things at the top and the bottom. First of all, you can get free access to the TMS, which gives you the ability to access all Microsoft Mock materials. And you can get that at the Learn on Demand Systems website, resources with the pound offers. Otherwise, if you just go to the site and look down at the very bottom, there's instructor offers. Practice. Prepare for new classes by looking for the courses and take our challenge-based labs. There's an all-access pass available for MCTs and other trainers. Make sure you try out the virtual classroom features. Get used to your virtual delivery environment. And last but not least, you can build your own labs if you would like to augment what you're already teaching, or if you want to just use, you want to teach some people some Azure things. There's free Cloud Slice lab developer options available for MCTs as well. There are going to be lots of resources coming your way after this event with the recordings and also in the resources, but there's one thing that I want you to be aware of, and that is that you can still register for other things down here at the, learnondemandsystems.com/webinar-week. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for your time,